Hello, this is Scotland at 7 on Friday the 21st of January. I'm Hugh Stewart and I'm in the Glasgow studio. And tonight I'm joined by Chris McCusker, who's in Newton Mearns. Is that right, Chris? Hello.
Good evening, Hugh. It is very accurate.
Okay, thanks. So, Chris, we'll discuss the main stories in a couple of minutes after I read out today's coronavirus numbers from Scotland. As of 2 p.m. today, there are 7,162 new infections, including cases identified either using the first LFD or the PCR positive test. There are 16 new reported deaths of people who had tested positive. The number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by the coronavirus infection now stands at 10,165. This number only includes those who have died having received a positive test for the virus in the previous 28 days. Of the people who have tested positive, 1,511 were in hospital last night, 43 of whom were in intensive care. As of 8 a.m. this morning, 4,404,268 people had received their first dose of the COVID-19 vaccination. 4,099,222 have received a second dose, and 3,238,127 have received a third dose or booster. The latest UK daily figures show 153,490 patients who have tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness, an increase of 288 since yesterday. This number refers to deaths in all settings and not just hospitals. So, Chris, before we move on, I think it's important this week to stress for Scottish viewers that we have not given up all precautions. One English guy I spoke to the day before, no, yesterday, said it's back to normal now. There's no restrictions. We are still wearing masks. We are still being advised to take a test before meeting a large number of people. And generally, the precautions are
Yeah,
back to where they were at the start of December.
and I for one welcome that. I've got vulnerable members in my own family, and I was actually, funnily enough, I hate to admit this, but I was watching the news earlier on, the mainstream news, and they were pontificating about school children in England having to disband their face masks as of today. Sort of like yesterday they were wearing face masks, today they're not. And I'm hearing, I think I'm right, it was about roughly about 100 odd schools that are discussing as to whether they're willing to take the government to task over this. And obviously, from a trade union point of view, there'll be a lot of trade union members who are teachers and the ancillary staff as well. That are obviously wanting to protect themselves, and I think they're 100% correct in that action.
Yeah, these are protective measures. That's the phrase we like to use here, and we will come back to that again. There is a story from the Scottish Parliament yesterday, so we'll discuss that in a minute. The first story we have to talk about tonight, Chris, is about the UK state pension. The payments system is not fit for purpose, resulting in a shameless shambles of an underpayment scandal which left tens of thousands of pensioners short-changed. This is according to a scathing report from a committee of MPs. The Public Accounts Committee at the PAC also lambasted the Department of Work and Pensions, the DWP, for their complacency and accused it of not having been sufficiently transparent to Parliament about these problems. In September last year, it emerged that the DWP was estimating it had underpaid 134,000 pensioners, mostly women, a total of more than £1 billion of state pension cash to which they were entitled. At that time, the NAO, the National Audit Office, said this long-term underpayment of state pensions, some problems date back as far as 1985, was the result of repeated errors that were almost inevitable amid complex rules and outdated IT systems. It emerged that those affected, whom the DWP could trace, would be paid an average of £8,900 each. The state pension is paid to around 12.4 million people, and these errors affected pensioners who first claimed it before April 2016 and who do not have a full national insurance record or should have inherited additional entitlement from their deceased partner. Of the 134,000 people hit by these problems, it thought that 94,000 are still alive. That's about 0.9% of those currently claiming the pre-2016 basic state pension. Where those affected have died, the department owes the pensioners' estate. The PAC, that's the Public Accounts Committee, decided to investigate the issue and said that the underpayments uncovered ranged from between 1 penny up to 128,000. So this issue, obviously, Chris, has been taking a long time to gather. So for years and years, people were not getting the what they were entitled to. Now, first of all, it mainly hits women. I guess that's principally because of the old national insurance stamp. A lot of women were told in the post-war period that it wasn't for them, or just paid a cheap stamp. So in fact, it's mainly women who weren't actually paid up and couldn't get the occupational pension. So it is really discriminatory, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I mean, for years I remember my mum talking about, should I pay the big stamp or should I just, continue to pay the wee stamp as it was known north of the border. But I think it's more to do with the fact that reforms have been well overdue. It's an outdated system. To actually quote Dame Meg Hillier, I don't know whether she's Tory or whether she's Labour, but she said that it's clunky at best and very, very disjointed. So, in these days of technology, I think it should definitely be revamped and updated and, be made fit for the modern era. That said, again, obviously, I would wish that Scotland had its own, controls over those affairs so that we can actually do it. We can actually design a system that is, befitting the citizens of Scotland.
Well, one of the things they talk about, of course, in the report is that it's extremely difficult and unwieldy. So it's almost not surprising that some people in the DWP got it wrong. Maybe another issue here is that question of transparency, which the Public Accounts Committee pointed out. Now, what I'm thinking here is that these people who were for years underpaid obviously didn't know. So would it be part of a new Scottish system, do you think, to make sure that people are well informed? Should there be public information films, the kind you used to get, saying this is what you're entitled to. If you're not getting it, here's a number to contact. So,
Well,
you only get away with this because people don't actually know, people are kept in the dark.
yeah, and this is something that's bugged me for years. As I would like to think a honest citizen. I mean, it used to pain me as to how many people knew how to play the system, and obviously you never know. The full summary of people's statuses outside your own home. But you hear anecdotal stories, sometimes down the pub or on the golf course, and it was, oh, I get this and I got that and I got the next thing, and you wonder, why do I not even know about these, uh, uh, various benefits, and and why isn't there more information given out on who qualifies and who does not qualify? So from that point of view, yes,
Yes,
as
and of course
as you rightly say.
it's not a benefit; it's a right, isn't it? Of course, and people need to be made aware of what their rights are. So let's hope in the future Scotland then the system will be clear, easy to administer, and transparent. One way of doing it, yeah, of course, if it's a universal, if everyone gets the same amount, maybe the problem here is changing from the old system to the new one. But if it's a clear system and it's universal, everyone gets it. You know if you're not getting it, don't you?
Well, again, that's the chance that Scotland has. Once we become independent, and the groundwork for that is being set out just now. I know for a fact that when Jane Freeman was in charge, limited scope that she had, she actually laid a real good bedrock for Shirley Ann Somerville to take over from. And as there's more competencies that are coming to Scotland, which will give us a good platform to work on for when we do get all the levers that are available to us, we can shape in it a way that everybody it is actually a system that will benefit everybody and not just a few.
Yes, we are gradually moving on to a Scottish welfare system based on respect, the Scottish Government's attitude is. And we have reported, in fact, already on moves that are coming in, I think, from the new financial year, April, of disability benefits moving into Scottish control. And that leads me to the next question, which is that the UK Government, the next story, the UK Government faces a £150 million bill after a court confirmed tens of thousands of severely disabled people were discriminated against as a result of being left financially worse off after being moved on to universal credit. A scathing judgment handed down today marks the fourth victory in a 6-year fight for justice against the Department of Work and Pensions, the DWP, which was brought by two disabled men who had their disability benefit payments cut by £180 a month after they moved house. This is more than 5 years ago. The men, known as TP and AR, began their legal challenge in 2016 and 2017, arguing the deduction was discriminatory and had caused them serious hardship. Despite rulings in the pair's favour by both the High Court and the Court of Appeal, the DWP still refused to compensate the full monthly loss, instead offering just £120. Today's judgment found the DWP had once again discriminated against the men. The judge, Mr. Justice Holgate, said the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions had been unable to show an objective and reasonable justification for her differential treatment of people in TP and AR's position. The judgment also found in favour of a disabled mother and child known as claimants AB and F, who had lost disability payments in child tax credit when they moved on to universal credit, but without transitional relief. They had suffered discrimination manifestly without reasonable foundation, the judge found. According to evidence provided by the DWP to the court during the claim, the ruling will affect up to 50,000 claimants, while the cost of providing transitional relief will involve sums of £20 to £30 million a year over a 6-year period. Before moving on to universal credit, both men had been in receipt of the severe disability premium, that's the SDP, and the enhanced disability premium, the EDP benefits, which were designed to meet the additional care needs of severely disabled people living alone with no carer. Despite being advised by the DWP officials that they would receive transitional relief, meaning in effect their income would not change, when they moved on to universal credit, both their EDP and their SDP stopped, and each had £178 a month deducted, leaving them unable to meet key care needs. Well, there's a number of issues here that are quite disturbing. First of all, Chris, the number of times the claimants won a court case and still the DWP refused to budge. I mean, why are these people so mean with money? Does it come off their bonus or something?
Well, there are allegations of the DWP operatives working to some sort of bonus scheme. I don't know if that's in evidence today. It's certainly I heard stories about that maybe about 3-5 years ago. But this is actually something that's actually quite close to my heart, because roughly about 5 years ago, actually, I had to go to a court of arbitration for my elder brother. I'm his principal carer, and the DWP actually done an assessment on my elder brother without my prior knowledge, and he actually thought he was being quite polite and answering all the questions correctly, and just wanted the person out his way, out the door, and the answers that my brother gave him resulted in him losing roughly about £180 every week, and I had with the welfare rights team, I managed to go to arbitration and claim that money back because it was a wrongful assessment. And that was the tactics that were deployed then. So, again, we go back to the first story as the fact that the UK pensions, UK benefits, UK state aid, or call it whatever you like, is just not fit for purpose, and it actually demonised the recipient. And it's heartwarming to hear the fact that Scotland has put dignity, fairness, and respect at the heart of everything they do as they're trying to formulate a new welfare system for its citizens.
You made me think there about movies I've seen where somebody's been questioned by the cops and then a lawyer comes in and says, "Don't say anything, right? Don't reveal anything until you've discussed it with your lawyer." And that's what I was thinking as you described the assessment. It sounds like if a lawyer had come in, they'd have said to your brother, don't answer any questions." But it's not supposed to be an interrogation, is it?
Yeah, but I mean, basically, the issue with my older brother, I don't mind, outlining it as the fact that, James needs somebody with him pretty much constantly, 24 hours a day. He cannot live with himself, and he is unable to make rational choices, for his own benefit. I mean, if I gave James just for argument's sake, £5 and told him to go and buy a tin of coffee, he would just take the first one that came off the shelf. He wouldn't say, "Oh, wait a minute, I can't afford that tin of coffee because I've only got X amount, and and that costs Y." So his train of thought, his rationale is just not the same as everyone else's. So it's unfair to ask, can you complete a task? Can you make a cup of tea without burning yourself? Well, he did it yesterday, but it doesn't mean to say that he'll no burn himself tomorrow. Did you get in the bath okay yourself? Or, I got in the bath okay myself yesterday, but last week I fell.
Yeah. But you would like to think that the professionals assessing people like your brother were, well, and caring and looking after their interests and not trying to pull a fast one and not trying to catch them out. So is that what we mean by the respect agenda? Have you any evidence whether under the new system people are actually looking at the clients as citizens who are entitled to care and not as a soft mark that they can steal money from?
Well, I think that now I think that there's a more tactile approach, especially in Scotland. Not just because I successfully took them to court and won his money back, but I think that that through the ages, I think that the DWP know the fact that they are not well liked in Scotland, and I think that they are slightly more tactile now. And I mean, I've had to drum it into James that that on no account does he let anyone into the house without my prior knowledge of it. In fact, I've actually went so far as to make sure that all his mail is redirected to my house, because James has got a habit of picking up mail and just putting it in the bin. Do you know what I mean? And sometimes I don't know when there's hospital appointments to take him to, or doctor's appointments, or clinics, or whatever. So it's far easier for myself just to make sure that all that information and all that paraphernalia comes to me, and then I can deal with it.
Yeah, I see. Well, I've had a couple of letters recently I'd like to put in the bin, but that's another story. Anyway, let's move on to hundreds of NHS consultants in England are shareholders in profit-making joint ventures with private healthcare firms in arrangements which have generated more than £1 billion in revenues since 2015, it has emerged. The Centre for Health and the Public Interest, that's the CHPI, an independent think tank, has identified 481 consultants in England with shares in up to 34 private ventures set up in partnership with providers ranging from the huge US healthcare firm, that's HCA, to Specsavers opticians. The vast majority of these consultants, 73%, are NHS doctors. In the report published today, CHPI claimed the arrangements were often opaque and that the financial incentives created by these joint ventures could lead to conflicts of interest. It's calling on regulators to investigate, saying that the COVID-19 pandemic has turbocharged the share of NHS budgets being spent in private clinics. The report found no evidence of wrongdoing and there were no instances of patients being put at risk. But CHPI Director David Rowland said lack of scrutiny and public understanding of these arrangements meant there was potential for abuses to occur. Between 2015 and 2020, the last full year for which accounts are available, joint ventures with consultants generated nearly £260 million in operating profits. While the majority of this cash went to private firms, consultant shareholders extracted an estimated £31 million in dividends. Okay, so I think the first point we need to clarify is although this report is in England, that's because the English NHS is a separate organisation, although it works, of course, with the Scottish NHS. But this report shouldn't suggest that Scottish consultants don't also benefit from private practice. Would you agree?
Yeah. But more generally, I think this is a stark reminder of how corporate capitalism is seeping into our health boards, and everybody is obviously, well, everybody should be watchful and mindful of Britain pursuing the American model, or should I say, the American approach to healthcare. Because it is vastly enthused by the wealthy hedge fund managers and bankers and stuff like that, and it's all run for corporate profit. And that's obviously the wrong way to go. Being an avid supporter of Nye Bevan, back in the day, that it was specifically designed to help the people at point of contact, and there are obviously things that have moved medical science on and medical practice on and stuff like that obviously needs investment. But I think actually any fiscally responsible government would actually invest in their NHS, because in order to have a healthy economy, you have to have a healthy workforce.
Yeah, of course. And incidentally, the company I mentioned here, HCA, if I'm not mistaken, that's a big American company based in Nashville. And they're actually, during the COVID years, they've actually become heavily involved with a lot of English NHS trusts. So that is an English story. The big hospitals in London have, in fact, been paying HCA millions in some cases to take patients off their hands, in order to leave room for COVID. So that doesn't happen in the same extent in Scotland. But HCA have undoubtedly used COVID as, let's call it, a market opportunity in business terms.
Yeah. But I mean, make no mistake, there's always been a certain amount of privatisation within the health boards. I mean, dating back, you go through the history of Harley Street and stuff like that people have always paid, for special private treatment, and that's there if they want it. However, what if we take in just for one instance, the actual framing of Obamacare was actually to try and sort of like melt down the actual corporate attitude towards the way that the actual American healthcare is actual, its whole business model. Where I mean, if you're out when you used to be able to go out of Europe, your wee card, your wee EIC card, got the bog standard. But if you broke your arm and stuff like that and all the rest of it, and you needed extra treatment, you had to pay for it, and it was as simple as that. I think everybody widely accepts that. But I think when a pandemic comes along and people will actually start making profit out of other people's pain, that's when it becomes morally repugnant.
Now, let's on the subject of COVID. I'll move on to the next story, which was raised in the Scottish Parliament this week. The SNP has accused the Scottish Tories of being out of touch with reality, as new polling shows a majority of people support the measures taken by the Scottish Government to protect the public from the Omicron variant. This Savanta ComRes poll for the Scotsman shows 2/3 of Scots think the measures introduced before Christmas were the right thing to do to curb the spread of COVID after the Omicron variant emerged. The SNP claimed the results demonstrate that Scottish Tories are out of touch with the people of Scotland when they accused the Scottish Government of going too far with the measures. Commenting, convener of the Health, Social Care and Sport Committee, Gillian Martin, MSP, said, as the Omicron variant emerged, the Scottish Government made very difficult but correct calls to introduce measures which would curb the spread of the virus, as we learned how much more transmissible the new variant was. If it was up to the Scottish Tories, they would have accepted more people being admitted to hospital and more deaths, and that was just not an acceptable outcome. Their plan would also have seen our hospitals overwhelmed, leading to serious harm and people with other illnesses and conditions. So this was raised in the Parliament by Douglas Ross, leader of the Scottish Conservatives, and I think he also said it last week. He's really been saying to Nicola Sturgeon, back in December, you overreacted. The extra measures you took in, such as closing indoor meetings of over 200 and making people sit down at restaurants and cafes, those extra measures were not necessary. You overreacted because we didn't do that in England and things are fine. Is Dr. Shaw's right?
I mean, no, I mean, he's not right. Obviously, I'm never going to agree, with anything that Douglas Ross says. But, I mean, at the end of the day, Douglas, we all know he's a complete lightweight. So, but, I mean, it was interesting to hear what Mark Drakeford had to say to, I think it was Naga Minchetti on the BBC. When he was interviewed, and she was saying, why are you not going the same way as England? And he was basically saying, well, because we're a responsible government, unlike the English government. I mean, we don't need to, throw wild cats into the story in order to, distract you from, what's really going on. So, I mean, this is again just to my mind. I think it's just Douglas Ross playing black and white politics. I mean, because Nicola pointed out that at every turn during the last 2 years, the Scottish Tories have opposed every measure that the SNP government and now the Greens as well. Every measure that has been proposed in order to keep our citizens safe. And, it's just because the fact that Boris wants to open the economy, toot sweet right away. He wants basically bums on seats. He wants the tills chinginal in the way, and and revenue brought in for the treasury. He wants business back. Pretty much as normal service. But what is normal service now that Brexit has actually been enacted?
We'll maybe come to Brexit later if we have a chance. But let me go over this point about numbers of infections between Scotland and England, because Douglas Ross, whether lightweight or not, he certainly has been following the party line. that Omicron has peaked and we can forget about it, right? And that's what he was saying last week. He's saying you overreacted, you didn't need to bring in these extra measures. And of course, Nicola Sturgeon is saying, well, the reason it's gone down now is because we did bring in these extra measures. But I don't know if you had a chance to look at the figures, but can you actually easily say whether the infection numbers are different between Scotland and England, when you balance up the size of the populations?
Well, I think when you balance up the size of the population, whether it was whether this is my own personal view. I would rather be safe than sorry. So I welcomed Nicola Sturgeon's announcements at Christmas. I was lucky enough that the restrictions didn't impinge on my festive plans in any such way, shape, or form. I stayed within the rules, and I was able to have people around me that matter to me, at the important times, and that is, immediate family. So from that point of view, from and it may be a selfish point of view, I was quite happy with the restrictions that she put in. And then I mean, even going back to what we were discussing earlier on about the face masks, that I think that it should be an individual's choice whether they want to continue, adhering to the guidelines as they are set out at this moment in time. There are people, who are still following the guidelines from Christmas. There are people who have kind of relaxed a wee bit now, and there are people that are just taking the masks off altogether. Personally, I think if you want to wear a mask, if you feel that that's safe for you, then fair play to you. And we shouldn't be dictated to, at the behest of one government, one government out of four that is actually bucking the system. Is actually bucking the trend, because Wales, Northern Ireland, and Scotland are pretty much in unison with each other. It's the UK government that are out of step with the rest of the country.
Yep, and I think you'll find mask wearing is pretty common throughout Europe as well. So, of course, you're invited on for your views, Chris, but let me just remind readers that the Scottish Government's advice, it's on the Scottish Government website. Well, mask wearing in trains, buses, taxis, that's not advice, that's still the rule. Other additional advice, like having tests before meeting large groups, is strongly advised. So that's where we are anyway at Scotland at the moment. Now, we're going to move on to another UK story. Hundreds of people have been stripped of their British citizenship over the last 15 years, according to research, including one man who was stateless for almost 5 years. Research carried out by Free Movement, a website run by lawyers to provide information for those affected by immigration control, has found that at least 464 people have had their citizenship removed since the law permitting this practice was relaxed 15 years ago. The government does not routinely publish the total number of people it strips of British citizenship. CJ McKinney of Free Movement says the lack of figures from the Home Office was frustrating. This is an extremely serious punishment that amounts to being banished from the UK in many cases. Saying how often existing citizenship deprivation powers are used is the bare minimum of transparency that Parliament and the public should expect. One of her most well-known cases is that of Shamina Begum, who was deprived of a British citizenship after leaving the UK as a 15-year-old schoolgirl to join Islamic State and lost her battle to have it restored in February 21. McKinney found that since 2006, 175 people have been deprived of their citizenship on national security grounds and 289 because of fraud. Prior to 2006, the power had not been used since 1973. A power to deprive someone of British citizenship goes back to 1914, but in recent years the legal test about when it can be used was watered down. Between 2006 and 2010 there were 9 cases according to Freedom of Information data, but by 2017 numbers had peaked at 148 people who had their citizenship removed that year. In 2018, there were 73 cases. In 2019, 82. And in 2020, there were 42 cases. So this is really a new measure, although it's obviously been on the statute books for a century, but it wasn't really used until actually it began. I suppose that must have been during the Tony Blair years, but it's really been used quite a lot now. And as these lawyers have said, apart from Shamina Begum, which was well publicised, most of this is completely out of the spotlight of publicity. What do you think of this? Should a government have the power to be able to say you're unacceptable, you're a danger to the public, so clear off?
Well, I think there should be a certain level where the government could actually identify persons of danger, shall we say, and as wholly to sort of like do your homework on people, But we have to remember that being a part of an international community, there are certain rules and regulations that prevent you from actually physically removing anyone. But this story, it's got me wondering here, and I'm not jumping into a conspiracy theory, but I'm just wondering about the many British Gurkhas. Maybe about 10 years ago and stuff like that were quite prominent. I think it was Joanna Lumley who was sort of like fighting their corner.
Yes, she did.
As quite a few of them were denied indefinite leave to remain, on British shores and stuff like that after fighting for their so-called country. So I'm a bit surprised at the figures that you quoted there, Hugh. They sound quite low, when I actually think about that contingent of British citizens.
Well, I think maybe the Gurkhas are probably in a similar position to Afghan refugees to whom we promised asylum and promised a life here. So they were applying for British citizenship. This one's more to do with people who already were citizens and who have now been told you're not, right, you're out. The one thing, of course, is in international law, you can't make somebody stateless. So clearly, in at least one case, that did happen. And I think the issue with Shamina Begum was that the British said, well, her parents are Bangladeshi, I think it was, and therefore Bangladesh can take her in, although I think Bangladesh said, nope, nothing to do with us. But the international law says you could only deprive somebody of citizenship if they have another passport and another place they can go to.
Yeah, but again, it just highlights the woeful lack of compassion, for another human being that has been displayed, sadly since the days of. I mean, you very rarely got stories like this during the tenure of Margaret Thatcher, let alone John Major or David Cameron and stuff like that. And this is only recently, sort of like being discussed in the latter days, where obviously we've had Theresa May and now Boris Johnson. And it seems to be a tradition that the UK government are willing to go to in order to isolate themselves from the international community, that that they deem it acceptable, to even have this actual ongoing discussion. It's honestly, to me, it's completely inhumane.
And it certainly overlaps with, of course, an emphasis on nationality, particularly with the Borders and Nationality Act being passed by the UK government, which in fact increases the powers to throw people out of the country. And I'm thinking also of the Windrush generation. Lots of people, maybe European citizens as well, could now be potentially thrown out of the country with no notice. So it's been used a lot in the last 10 years, and there is the law there to allow it to be used more in future. So again, nationality, it's a very sensitive issue these days with this government.
Yeah, but again, you know, as I was trying to make a point, it seems to be the course of trajectory that this government wishes to pursue. And you know, and obviously, you know, with the enactment of Brexit, which you know. We were all sold the story that it was all about, you know, taking back control of our borders and all the rest of it. It's you know turned out obviously you know not to be true for a start.
Now, let's move on to
You
another
know,
story, Chris, which is, in a way, this is connected because we've heard today that the German government and the new coalition wants to attract another 400,000 qualified workers from abroad each year to tackle both the demographic imbalance and labour shortages in key sectors that risk undermining the recovery from the COVID pandemic. The shortage of skilled workers has become so serious by now that it's dramatically slowing down our economy. Christian Duer, the parliamentary leader of the co-governing Free Democrats, that's the FDP party, told the business magazine Wirtschaftswoche, "We can only get the problem of an ageing workforce under control with a modern immigration policy. We have to reach the mark of 400,000 skilled workers from abroad as quickly as possible," Duer added. Chancellor Olaf Scholz's Social Democrats, plus Duer's Libertarian FDP, and the Green Party agreed in their coalition deal on measures like a points system for specialists for countries outside the European Union and lifting the national minimum wage to €12 an hour to make working in Germany more attractive. The employer-friendly German Economic Institute estimates that the labour force will shrink by more than 300,000 people this year as there are more older workers retiring and younger ones entering, more older workers retiring than younger ones entering the labour market. This gap is expected to widen to more than 650,000 in 2029, leaving an accumulated shortage of people of working age in 2030 to 5 million. 5 million. The number of Germans in employment grew to nearly 45 million last year, despite the COVID pandemic. After decades of low birth rates and uneven immigration, a shrinking labour force also poses a demographic time bomb for Germany's public pension system, in which fewer employees are burdened with the task of financing the pensions of a growing mass of retirees who are enjoying longer life expectancy. So I thought we should just quickly look at that one. That's really kind of the opposite. There's one country trying to kick people out, and a leading country in Europe, really very important as a priority, trying to attract people in very large numbers. But Scotland has a similar situation, really only on a much smaller scale, but also ageing population. Well, we need people. We need young people coming in here, don't we? We need to encourage them in, not
well,
kick them out.
yeah, and it'll come as no surprise to yourself and the viewers is the fact that obviously I'm going to bring up migrants and refugees. I mean, you know, Germany has taken in excess of 200,000 migrants and refugees, you know, since 2014. So I'm slightly surprised at the fact that they're looking for, you know, an extra 400,000. But you know, like Scotland, you know, I mean, Germany largely welcomes largely welcomes migration. And you know, Scotland, just like Germany, would you know love to be in charge of its own immigration policy, where you know we can welcome people to you know come here and work in our economic industries and various sectors. But unfortunately, because we are you know tied into this unholy union, this unholy alliance that doesn't allow us to, you know, be as welcoming as what we would like to be, then you know, it would be interesting to see how many people would actually want to migrate to an independent Scotland that was actually free from, you know, the meddlings of the lower part of England.
But it is necessary anyway, yes. So if Scotland does, once Scotland gets control of immigration, then attracting people in is necessary. And of course, the sort of people we're talking about, people who've travelled a long way to get here, are usually young and very often qualified as well. So they're the people we need. However, I'm looking at the clock, Chris. We better move on. Another story which we have been covering, and we will no doubt come back to next week, Ukraine. The top US and Russian diplomats made no major breakthrough at talks on Ukraine today, but have agreed to keep talking to try to resolve a crisis which has stoked fears of a military conflict. After talks in Geneva, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken warned of a swift and severe response if Russia invades Ukraine after amassing troops near its border, and Russian Foreign Secretary Sergei Lavrov said Moscow was still waiting for a written response to demands for security guarantees. But both said they were open to further dialogue, and Secretary Blinken saw grounds to hope that mutual security concerns could be addressed. He described the talks as frank and substantive and told reporters that Russia now faced a choice. It can choose a path of diplomacy that can lead to peace and security, or the path that will lead only to conflict, severe consequences, and international condemnation. Mr. Blinken said, adding that diplomacy would be preferable. We've been clear, if any Russian military forces move across Ukraine's border, that's a renewed invasion. It will be met with swift, severe and united response from the United States and our partners and allies. Mr. Lavrov said the ball was in Washington's court. Describing the meeting as open and useful, he said Moscow would understand whether talks were on the right track once it had received a written response to its sweeping security demands from the United States. Russia's demands include the halt to NATO's eastward expansion and a pledge that Ukraine will never be allowed to join the Western military alliance. Mr. Blinken said he expected to share with Russia our concerns and ideas in more detail and in writing next week. He said he and Mr. Lavrov have agreed to further discussions after that. So, Chris, as I said, we will, of course, keep reporting on this one because so far, still talking. But I think since we started covering this one, more Russian troops have been moved to the border. Do you think is Vladimir Putin really playing the West bluff? Does he think that these severe measures that Blinken is talking about are just going to be more sanctions, which he can easily put up with?
Well, I think that's the way that the USA will go. I don't think that they'll want to go in gung ho. We've seen them do that before to not great effect. But that it's at the moment it's posturing and kind of like my dad's bigger than your dad routine and all the rest of it. It sounds to me like at least there's space for discussion. It seems to be good-willed at this early stage, for the sake of the surrounding countries, let's hope that the discussions continue and come to some sort of amicable agreement without the need for any incursion or conflict or and all the rest of it, and then hopefully Russia will withdraw their substantive amount of troops from the border.
There's a lot of troops there again, so we'll report on that as the talks continue next week. Now I'm looking at the clock, we'll see if we can rush through a couple of stories. Well, first of all, we've got a very important story here, that an independent chair has been appointed by the Scottish Government to oversee the creation of a national audiology review group. The group will examine the hearing services provided to both children and adults in health boards across Scotland. It comes after a report published in December last year outlining a series of errors in the treatment provided to children by paediatric audiology in NHS Lothian. Further reviews highlighted areas for improvement in the delivery of audiology services in Scotland, which need looked at more closely. The group will provide recommendations for a national plan for the service. Health Secretary Hamza Yusuf said, following the unacceptable failures which were highlighted in paediatric audiology in Lothian, I want to make sure our hearing services are fit for purpose across Scotland, and this means ensuring any wider issues will be identified and rectified. And Mr Yusuf said, the first step of this is to appoint an independent chair, a process which will be undertaken as quickly as possible to provide the necessary leadership and oversight for this important piece of work. This is quite an alarming gap in detection, from what I believe, detection on hearing defects in young children. Obviously, it has to be detected quickly as possible, and parents might not be aware of it, hence the need for audiology services. But it seems, according to the report, that basically children with hearing defects were being diagnosed much later. In fact, maybe years later compared to the best practices in England. So this is very serious, isn't it? Let's hope this report figures out what went wrong and gets it fixed.
Well, yeah, and I think hindsight obviously is a wonderful thing, and I can almost hear Douglas Ross in the background giving it, or even Sandesh Gulhani giving it, you've not done enough, you've not done enough, you've not done enough routine. That's absolutely fine, to stand up and bang that drum. However, the fact is that it's clearly set out that they are doing something about it. And I would much rather read about the fact that they are doing something about it than just actually reading the report, that actually highlights the problem. So quite clearly, Hamza Yusuf has actually identified that there's issues, surrounding children that have hearing impediments, and they're actually prepared to do something about it. So I think it's one of those good news stories.
Yes, you've got to expect things to go wrong, but when you find it, then you have to come up front and say, yes, that's not good enough, we've got to fix it. So here's something else that needs fixed. I'm just looking at the time. I'm going to try and go through this story very quickly, and then we might have room to discuss an item that you raised just before you came on, Chris. So finally tonight, work to identify a long-term solution to the A83, or 93 is fine. The A83 at the Rest and Be Thankful. The work is being stepped up. Preliminary ground investigations are expected to get underway next month as part of the design work to identify a preferred route option for a long-term solution to the A93 at the Rest and Be Thankful. Transport Scotland has confirmed Rayburn Drilling and Geotechnical Limited has been appointed to undertake the £1.8 million contract, which is expected to last 8 to 10 weeks, ending at the end of April, weather permitting. This level of investment is required to carry out the necessary extensive early investigation to best inform the design process for the scheme. These costs reflect both the challenging landscape presented at the route and the range and nature of the options under consideration. Transport Minister Graham Day said, addressing the resilience of the A83 at the Rest is one of the government's top priorities. Local residents and road users can be assured that the situation is being treated with the seriousness and urgency it deserves, with measures to maintain connectivity on a short, medium and long-term basis, all being pursued. Now let me just identify the A83 at the Rest for people who don't go over that way too often. If you're driving between Glasgow and Oban or Dunoon or going down to Campbellton, you have to go through this valley called the Rest and Be Thankful. It's at Glen Crow, just after Loch Long. And it keeps getting closed. The road keeps getting closed because of landslides. So do you think the Scottish Government really has taken too long to have dithered about this? Because for about 5 years or so, that road's regularly been closed every time there's been a heavy storm. And it's only now they're beginning to scope out the various options. Probably.
Well, I'm 54. I'm 54, and I remember first crossing the Rest and Be Thankful with my father when I was 8 years old. And we done it in I think it was an old articulated Bedford flatbed truck, and it was an arduous journey then, to say the least. You know, I mean, you hear the stories about the fact that the road's closed and everybody's got to use the old military road and you know this, that, and the next thing and whatnot, and what have you. I think people have to realise, obviously, it's a place of unequaled, unbridled beauty. Where you can literally see four seasons in one day, you know, it has to be treated with the respect that it is due. So therefore, you can't just go and drill through the side of a mountain in order to bypass the road. You can't start building bridges and stuff like that and spoil the view. And well, I mean, you know, what I'm really trying to say is the fact that there's, in order to make an omelette, you have to crack an egg. So from that point of view, the groundwork has to be done. It has to be done right. So all the geotechs have got to be done. All the various surveys have to be done. And the one thing that must be done is obviously it has to be done in a sensitive nature in order to preserve one of Scotland's natural beauty spots.
Aye, well, you're quite right. I know the road myself, and yeah, there's nothing like the view from the top down Glencroe. Right enough. I'll just have, I think we've got a couple of minutes, Chris. This is not on our agenda tonight, but Chris and I were discussing earlier on a non-story about Brexit. Now, what I mean by a non-story, Chris, is that myself and my colleagues here, Brian and Linda, have been looking all week for what happened to the lorry queues at Dover, because we heard about lorry queues earlier on caused by Brexit or truck driver shortages. And now we couldn't find anything in the news this week. I've been looking at the BBC. And so have these lorry queues been solved, or have the cameras been switched off or something?
No.
Why can't we find them?
Basically, I've got an exclusive for the Broadcasting Scotland
Right.
viewers. They've actually turned the cameras off on the motorway. So that's why there are no queues. The actual queue itself, someone told me, is actually greater than the actual distance between Dover and Calais. That's the actual queues on the island of Britain. The actual queue of lorries is longer than the distance between Dover and Calais, folks.
Well, there you are. You heard
that is what Brexit has brought you.
Aye. So you will not hear this on the BBC, Chris, but thank you for bringing that to our viewers' attention on Broadcasting Scotland. So, we're just about out of time now. So thanks for watching tonight, and it's a full Scottish on Sunday. So let me just remind you again that we are here because of you. Thank you, our viewers and our subscribers. If you want to help, please have a look at the donate button on our website, which is on the screen there. And if you are one of our subscribers, why don't you have a word with some friends of yours who support the need for independent broadcasting in Scotland, telling you the kind of stuff you don't get in the BBC, and you'll only get that, of course, if we have the funding coming in. The station here has all the equipment and all the technology we need to run a full 7-day news service. We just need to get that funding, because we don't get any help from any other sources apart from yourselves. So thanks a lot for watching, and thank you for being our subscribers. So once again, it's great, Chris, to have you joining us tonight from Newton Mearns. Thanks for being on and for giving us your opinion. And no doubt we'll see you again.
Thanks again for inviting me.
No bothers. We'll see you again, mate. Thanks. Okay, so that's it from me tonight. So it's good night from Hugh, Stewart, and my team in the studio. It's full Scottish on Sunday, and I'll see you next week. Thank you. Bye. Aye.